Welcome to a Coffee with Samso. Here we at the UWA Club here in Crawley on the campus of University of Western Australia. Coffee with Samso is where we speak with ASX companies and to get their stories. I've got Adavale back here, Adavale Resources back here with us today, and I've got David Riekie, Executive Director. ASX code for Adavale is ADD, market cap currently is around 10.5 million. Nickel sulphide story in Tanzania, a strong position in the East African nickel belt. David, welcome back. You were on the Samso platform not long ago. Look, starting off, you're finishing off a fundraising. Maybe just give us an update of what's happening and we can get into the story.
That's great. Look, Noel, thanks for having me back again. We did foreshadow that I would be talking to you again in a few weeks. It's probably been a couple more weeks along from that. But yes, during that time, we've actually undertaken a capital raising program. It's actually been set into two phases. The first phase was to actually do a placement, which introduces a new bunch of shareholders, high nets and small cap instos, which is fantastic. So we're building our register, which is what we wanted to do. But we also recognise the importance of maintaining that good relationship with our existing shareholders. So we provided them with an opportunity to also participate in a rights issue. So we'd like to think that that will be well subscribed because we think we're at a very good price point. So the raisings that we've got, the first one will basically allow us to do $1.8 million. Myself and another director are going to be participating in that, subject to shareholder approval. And a rights issue, which is going to be for $1.2 million. Add those together and we've got a war chest for around $3 million. But we've also seen the need as we start to progress and develop our opportunities that we wanted to have to be able to reach into those same shareholder groups to get further funds if they think that they're worthy of them. And that's done by way of an attaching option on a 1-for-3 basis. So we see that's an important program that will allow us to raise initially 3 and then 3 over a short dated period, which is about 12 months. So we've got those funds available to us. So we're well positioned to actually move forward with our program.
Okay, and speaking of your program, the last time we spoke, we had 32 targets. You were about to do or going to do your heliborne EM in July, which is passed, and you were saying that you're going to have some sort of drilling happening in August. How's that
shaping up? Yeah, look, we actually had we did actually have a number of targets generated from the gravity surveys, which is fantastic. 32. What we tried to do is we try to be quite discerning on which ones we choose to fly the heli. We've actually gone and chosen areas that we think are most prospective from what information we've got available to us, and we've actually combined those in areas that would look at 18 of those targets. So we still have 14 we still think is really, really quite good, but we think these would justify an early term outcome for the company and its shareholders if we focus on these 9 areas. So we've got those that program in a state of readiness. We've actually got, when this comes out, we're imminently going to be getting a helicopter which has been subject to additional approval to get across the border. So we've got all the equipment in there, we've got all the fuel dumps in there, we've got everything ready to go. Testing has been done on the equipment, we'll do some calibration and then we'll start flying. So that will happen virtually immediately. So we see that that is actually a very, very good step in actually unlocking what we think is potential with the gravity, refining it with the heli, so we're getting those understandings of where the conductors are sitting in those structures. We'd like to think that from that we'll quickly be able to assess that information because we're receiving on a timely basis, if not immediate basis. Our experts are basically in a state of readiness to receive that information, interpret it, and then we can start defining where those drill targets are going to sit within those 9 areas that we've outlined.
I guess, to help viewers, potential investors sort of get their head around what you guys are doing, because nickel is a funny thing. It's very, very geophysical bound in terms of the initial part of exploration. And last time we spoke, you talked about how you guys are sort of comparing your EM signatures to Kabanga and trying to find that relationship. and you've got this conceptual model how you interpret it that I saw in your presentation. Can you help sort of elaborate on that and just give us an idea?
Sure. Look, hopefully I won't confuse people, but I'll try and keep it as simple as possible for everyone's benefit. I'm not a technical guy, but I need to understand what's going on so I can hopefully share that information. A lot of the initial discoveries that were made in this particular region were based on surface expression. So they saw what was coming out of the ground. They then correlated that with a particular EM low. So they thought that they were the major ingredients to understand where they should be finding. Because the nature of the country rock there, you need to be a little bit more refined in how you actually come to those sort of conclusions. So surprisingly, very surprisingly, there hadn't been a lot of gravity that had been undertaken in this area. In fact, none that we're aware of to discover any of these bodies. So what we're trying to line up here is if surface expression is there, we look to that. If there is an opportunity to see an EM low, that's an important feature. A gravity density signature also gives you that level of additional refinement. And it's then the ability to see further down, which is why we're doing the heli, to see further down. So what we're trying to do is to use all of those very useful tools, correlate them, and find out exactly where we think we've got the greatest chance of actually hitting the massive sulphides. As you said before, nickel can be a little bit tricky. It's reliant upon a couple of different features that you see in how it's actually been placed and how it's been generated. I read an article the other day, and I don't know whether this is going to upset a lot of technical people, but you've got a situation where it's kind of the nickel sulphide is more like oil on water or oil on vinegar, where you see that it's actually got those lenses that are appearing. Now, those sorts of emplacements means that they're not everywhere, and you need to be discerning as to where you put the drill hole down. So this whole process that we're going through sounds like it's quite long-winded, and my explanation is quite long-winded, but it's important to understand that when you start drilling, that's the expensive bit. So you've done all of these other processes to get to the point where when you start drilling, you've got a greatest chance of actually hitting these nickel sulphides down there. And it will also benefit from the fact that we'll use downhole EM. So we can put the probes down, and that gives you a greater level of understanding at depth where we think we are relative to these structures. So it's a continual level of refinement of where we're putting the holes in and what we'd like to think we can discover. And we're reasonably confident. I don't want to be overconfident, but we've got some really good indicators that some of these structures are mineralised. I can't give any indication as what the scale of it is at this point in time, but we're confident that we're in the right terrain. As you can see, the proximity to Kabanga, it's not a neurology play. We've got the right rocks, we've got the right structures. We just now need to get the drill rigs going after we've done this EM, which will happen, as you pointed out. We were supposed to get the EM flowing in July. It's now August. Apologies, but we had a couple of little hiccups with regards to getting stuff across the border. That'll happen imminently. From then, 10-day program, 14-day program, continuous investigations on what we're finding, and that'll give us an idea where we start putting some drill pads down.
Okay. When we look at the image on your announcements and your presentations, I can see where Kabanga is, and I can see this massive trend sort of going sort of north of it. To help us interpret that, you mentioned you're looking for a dense rock. Are we talking about when we look at those pretty images? Are we looking for the hot colours or the low colours?
Yeah, look, that's a good question because colours can mean lots of different things, and geophysicists have a great deal of a challenge to actually sort of get that level of consistency with what they're doing. Certainly, from my point of view, anyway. If you look at Kabanga, there is actually, when we put in the announcement, there's different colours around where the hotspots are, whether the higher tenor and grade of the nickel is relative to those structures. So you need the right rock types. We also need to know where those sit. And you're quite rightly pointing out the fact that we've got a provincial scale opportunity, kind of akin to what we see in Western Australia, around Kambalda and like. But Kabanga actually sits within the East African nickel belt. As you've rightly pointed, it goes all the way from Uganda, all the way through Tanzania and south. So we actually think that we've got the benefit of the early term investigations by BHP, interestingly enough, early days, 70s, 80s, 90s and thereafter, before Barrick and Glencore came in there. And they actually identified these different pockets. They didn't have the same processes in place to use what we're now using, which is gravity. So if you look at the colours and the rock types and whatever, when we actually start putting out announcements, I will endeavour to give people as much information as to what the different colours mean and use these forums to explain them, because we're looking at the gravity lows and the high density of for the gravity surveys, and that was part of why we did what we did over Kabanga. We actually said, okay, they found stuff here, we think we've got something similar, can we use that as a template? And that's what we've done. So when we're starting to talk about megagale density, anything above 1 is really good. So we've actually found that there's a proliferation of these opportunities. So not only do we have the right rock types, the right EM signature, we've actually got the right densities that gives us, again, this greater correlation. By using this heli-EM, depending on the rock types, because it's not uniform over everything, we're going to be able to look anywhere between 400 to 600 metres below surface. Now that's going to save a lot of money, and it's going to give us that greater level of knowledge and understanding as to how the structures look. So without going into details, red's good, red's normally pretty good, but it needs to be put into context, and we need to maintain that context, which is what I would continue to do with presentations and narratives that I'm going to sort of start to build around the stories. The technical people will pick it up straight away. I just want to make sure that all our investors are capable of understanding what we're chasing and why this colour looks good, this is big, it's at depth, extends, what the orientation is. That's important.
I think in some ways a lot of investors, they miss the point that, what I'm trying to say is the East African nickel belt is actually a belt that, it may be isolated in terms of where it is, but it is also somewhere where not much work has been done over the time, and this is a time where people are getting a look at.
Yeah, I think timing and opportunity. You've seen lots of good opportunities that weren't in the right time or the right receptiveness to what's going on. We're actually very, very lucky. I mean, this has hastened very slowly. If you look at, I discovered this back in the 70s and 80s. It's taken till now, 40 years to get to this point. But BHP has recognised this, right? They were there to find it. They've gone back in there. They've made the investments. It's an option fee with regards to their balance sheet and what their money they're putting in, but it's an important option fee. We see this as a real endorsement of what's happening in this particular space. And yes, people say it's remote. Yes, it is remote. But there are basically investments being made in the logistics solutions, in power, in people, roads, facilities, services, the whole thing, which will mean that this could become a very, very important hub for not only Africa, but more particularly for Tanzania. So it becomes referenced as an area where they are going to be refining nickel. They're not just digging it out of the ground and selling it, they're actually getting that value add, which, rightly so, is important for their economy as well as our opportunity. And without coattailing too much on this, it gives us the ability to be that conduit for a value catalyst. So if we find what we think we're going to find there, it will be giving us options as to what we can do as an explorer become miner, whether we're a processor as well, will be at this point in time open to debate. But certainly we are actually getting the right sorts of messages and endorsement from people that are looking at it saying you're doing it the right way. You're getting the best chance of actually a meaningful discovery. And when I mean a meaningful discovery, we would like to hit something between 5 and 20 metres, anything above 1 to 1.5%. That to me will be when we start doing cartwheels. And that's really what we're focusing on. If you look at Kabanga's sitting at 2.6, it's actually up to about 3 in certain zones and higher, and they've got meaningful intercepts. We need to try and replicate that, and we're doing everything we can to give us the best chance of making a discovery of that size and that scale.
I mean, one of the things I wanted to highlight is when you look at where you guys are and where Kabanga and now BHP's come in, and they're not just here 100 million or whatever, just doing in stages, which means that there is thought into how they should invest into testing. It's almost like a feasibility study in some ways. And which is, it creates sort of an economy of scale for your future in terms of where you could go. It's a bit like Harrion, where they discovered this, but if Telfer wasn't there, then this might not be such a great discovery. Akin to, like, if you found something in Kalgoorlie, to monetize that is a lot easier because you got that there. And I guess, the next thing I want to say is, if BHP is there, BHP has many competitors who may like that. Hey, that's I wonder why they're there. Now, that thought in a basket. What's your comment to that?
I'm a corporate guy, so I see that as music to my ears, and I think that the shareholders should also recognise that, like every good company, you need to go through a process of due diligence, and the due diligence is basically from historical knowledge from BHP's perspective, but it also recognising that you go to where the resources are, to build the opportunities around scale and grade. And you might recognise that Kabanga's got both, scale and grade. So we are also going to be chasing scale and grade. So we need to make sure that we're going to be a commercial alternative for other people to look at us. And if we can demonstrate the whole quality control and quality assurance processes on how we're going about discovering them, I think we've got a very, very good template to be able to replicate that over all the areas that we've currently got and other areas that we might not have, so we can be more discerning. But I think that attitude needs to be recognised as to how we're going about doing things, so people have confidence in what we're getting. We're actually showing that we've done it the right way. It's a process of building that level of confidence and understanding. But again, it has to be commercial, so you need to make sure that you're finding stuff that's going to be of commercial interest to other people. And other parties will be looking at this saying, well, this East African nickel belt is going to be a rich opportunity for people to come in and do the right sort of deals and the right sort of structures that are going to unlock that value. And we see we're at the vanguard, we're at the forefront of being able to provide that level of opportunity for ourselves and our shareholders, but other parties to look at us as well.
Look, again, I'll go to my sort of go-to example, which is the Yamana belt, which is Gold Road. Exactly what, in fact, when you were describing that last few sentences there, my mind just went straight back to there. It was a belt. Everyone said it was not endowed. It was too young. And they went out there. They found a deposit was about 200,000 ounces. And most people would think that's fantastic, but it just wasn't going to work. And they took a hiatus for about 18 months to actually look and strategize. And 9 million ounces later, today as we speak, that's the result. And I think that's a good analogy for what you guys are trying to do. Would fair comment?
Yeah, look, it is. I mean, you've also, my technical director, John Hicks, always says it's exploration, Dave, but we're putting in all the right checks and balances to make sure that we have got the benefit of being able to replicate that. It is so important. You might find an isolated pocket, but you're not going to build a company on that. We need to try and continue to develop and expand and actually sort of continue to add value. So exploration dollars are going in there to expand what we would hope to become a resource at some point in time. We have to find it first, but we're building it on that. And that's really the philosophy. You're quite right. There's lots of analogies that you can draw, and they're good. We now need to basically start to build on that level of momentum that we started to generate. We've taken a step back. We've looked at what we needed to do. We've applied those. We're getting some successes. Success will actually be demonstrated with the drill bit, Noel. So we've got to make sure that we're moving towards that where we do have those sorts of successes. And these sorts of opportunities to build on that scale will then present itself, because we can actually replicate that if we know and understand the geology. You've got to understand the geology. So that's important.
Look, recent events, I know you're on a different end of the spectrum. You're on the trying to find it first. The takeover offer by BHP on Oz Minerals. Do you see this, because there's a pattern, right? It seems always to be the same, and that shows our age, because we've seen many decades of this.
Take that as a compliment.
Yeah. So do you see this as the start of that consolidation period of producers in the base metal space? Because it's sort of a space that's sort of been threatening to go for a run, but hasn't happened yet. But as we all know, base metals is what we are, right? We can't survive without it. So yeah, can you give us some comments on that?
Yeah, look,
And maybe tell us who else could be knocking on Adavale's door?
yeah, well, there are a few candidates. I mean, we're talking about future-facing metals. I mean, it's a term used. I mean, we're looking at an opportunity where BHP's made a strategic crack at, had a crack at Oz Minerals. Good on them. It makes a bit of sense. It comes back to this economy of scale. If you build it and it becomes big enough, you can actually do some cost savings. And I think cost savings and logistics will be a key feature in people's thinking going forward. I think I was asked a similar question about a year ago about what was happening in the space within Western Australia. And the answer is, I believe that there will be consolidation. It's kind of happened where you've got IGO, for instance, coming out and saying that they're looking at all minerals that make sense to them. Good on them. Gives the juniors an opportunity to start focusing on being really good at discovering stuff and finding things. And I think that you will see that there's going to be possibly a level of vertical integration. You've seen that consolidation and that revisiting of Nickel West and BHP and becoming bigger and better and a go-to outfit. BHP is over in Kabanga, but there aren't any other royalties or any other or contracts that are subject to what we have got and where we're at. So it does lend itself for other parties to come in. It's probably a bit premature to say who else might come in, but you need to have a look at all of the parties that have been demonstrated their capabilities of operating in these sorts of jurisdictions around the world. In the Americas, in Africa and you see the big guys will come in there, make an assessment, scale and grade, and what opportunities it might be to develop a real foothold in, well, we keep talking about this East African nickel belt. Kabanga's part of that belt. It doesn't know the belt. The belt is basically there, and it gives us an opportunity to look at those areas that may not have been properly assessed, which is what we think we're doing now, and they might be doing that as well. There might be other parties doing that as well, but certainly it's going to be more of a focal point, and the consolidation will happen. I don't have any doubt in my mind that people will need to get smarter as to how they're actually pulling things together. The cost of capital, where it is, those sorts of engagements, the social license to operate in countries, pull it all together, and you've got the benefit of economies of scale, discovery, outputs, the fact that there is an engagement with the country and people on the basis that wealth is shared around. That opportunity to benefit from the endowment of what your country offers. We've got it here. Africa's no different.
Look, I think that the issue companies like Adavale is that you're small, you're in this new thing, you're exploring your early stage, but I think what you keep coming back to, and I fully agree, is that you're in a belt, right? And this is a belt that not too many people have been for whatever reasons. It's a bit like going to the Koala Craton. Although it's in our backyard in Australia, it's comparatively to all the other provinces, it's not very well explored, even though there was discoveries in the 90s. And I think Kabanga, where Kabanga sits in the East African belt, has that analogy. It's just one of many that's around the world that seem not to have much work done.
Yeah, look, it's funny. When you put it in that context, I mean, it comes back to opportunity and it comes back to the timing. So we're looking now at a commodity that was previously skewed towards stainless steel and those sorts of important products. But now we've got this electrification, this the decarbonisation and electrification thematic that's at the forefront of everyone. We want to change for the good. My kids ask me why I do what I do, because I think it's actually going to be a good thing. You're finding things like nickel, and you're going back into it. It was always there. It was created millions and millions of years ago. But we just need to find the right way of extracting it in a very considered manner, and actually using that to best effect. And it comes back to that timing. So we see a need for nickel that's going to be put into electric vehicles and stationary storage and all those other things, which is good. That's going to be a different, a real differentiator. And I think that if you go back and look at these opportunities, and a lot of other gold mines, and I'm talking different commodities now, the discoveries are found within the shadow of the head frame, and we're saying, well, look, it's already been demonstrated with all the hard work that's been done. This is a rich area. We know that. That's why we pegged the ground, and that's why we're doing what we're doing now. So I think people will start to find out that nickel is endowed in a couple of places in the world, probably half a dozen, maybe 10, high grade and scale. we're in one of those areas, and people are starting to appreciate that. And I think that was part of the narration and the descriptions that we put to people when we went out and said, we're raising monies for these reasons because we think we're going to have an opportunity to find something of real significance in this particular area.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a few conversations ago when we talked. I asked actually the guys, Justin and Ian, about, should we be chasing mineral systems as opposed to the commodity? And I see where you guys are at is you got the system, you got the ingredients. You don't know, you don't see the nickel yet. You haven't drilled the hole, but everything seems to point to that direction where you have a cooking system that will produce the metal, as opposed to seeing some metal on the ground, not realizing whether you have a cooking system that can sustain that scale that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Looking at the nickel market, the price, the demand and supply issues, and it's sort of been a long journey for the bull, which that breakout, the pricing and everything else that everyone talks about hasn't really sort of stuck its head out. It's sort of been there. It's been a conversation. Can you give us your thoughts since you're in that industry?
Yeah, people might laugh, but people that use the material aren't going to talk the price up. And I think that it comes back to the strategic value of having a reliable, consistent product coming to you is what the manufacturers of all of these vehicles and the end users of all these products are. We've seen the price hovering around about $5, $6, $7 a pound, or put it into context, the current $22,000 a tonne, that $10 pound price is where it kind of needs to be as a minimum. And I think you'll see that as the demand increases over the coming years, and we're not talking about the next 6 months, we're probably talking about the next 5 years, I think you'll see that price will just generally find another platform, another foundation level, because we see that this product is going to be in greater demand as this whole EV revolution takes on. And it's not just the cars. Like I said, there are other vehicles and there's stationary storage and that use this. So people will start to migrate towards this. So there's not massive supplies coming on board. That's why you find the BHPs going in there and getting a material outcome of circa 50 to 60,000 tonnes of nickel a year that might come out of Kabanga. That's what it's talking to, and that's meaningful. So we look to sort of find out exactly where we think the price is going to settle. Well, it needs to be economic to be able to take it out of the ground and process it. So I think invariably you want to make sure that it's cheap enough so there's no substitution, but you also want to make sure that it's the right product for and fit for purpose. So these Class 1 nickels will come through. They'll be used for EVs. We see that the demand will increase. It's not a big market, Noel. This is why you've seen those major shifts in the price, but you'll see nickel could go up 5-10%. We've seen it gone up 5 times, but that's not sustainable. That was a squeeze. That was someone basically being reminded that those sort of things can happen if you're caught short. So we're finding that I think the price, in my humble view, will sit between 20 and 30,000 bucks a tonne. It'll probably sit around there. Maybe I'll go a little bit higher. But that level of certainty and that level of price point means that people have got something to aspire to. They know what they need to build their projects around to get to that point. So I think the demand will increase. I don't think the supply is necessarily going to be coming in along with the ride. You've got some global issues like what you're seeing in Ukraine and Russia, China. It's not all happy families, so you're looking to those sources of supply that are comfortable for the people that want to buy the material from them. I think those sorts of economic global metrics will actually have an impact on the price of nickel going forward. So I think it's going to be sustainably higher. I think maybe this year, next year, it might be waffling around a bit, but I think thereafter there will be a real demand, and there's not the supply to actually meet that.
I think the realistic and more answers what you said is that a bit like when I was interviewing Rick Rule, and he said, look, all those guys calling for gold to be 5,000, 10,000. I said, if it got to that point, we have some real problems on Earth. So the realistic thing is where it is, because everyone's making good money. It's about, how big, the grade, quality, and how sustainable it is in terms of a mining process.
That's right.
Look, going forward, I know we touched on this a bit. News flow for Adavale, with your EM, your heliborne stuff in your drilling. What else is in line?
Look, this quarter, this half of this calendar year, we're going to be pretty busy. Once we've actually worked out where we're going to drill, we're obviously going to start drilling. That's part of the reason why we raised these monies, and we've got those funds coming through. So we see that the drilling program should be getting underway end of August, but probably in all likelihood a real head of steam going into September and October. We've got a good weather window coming up to December. So we think that there's going to be a lot of activities, and obviously if we're getting those successes, a lot more activity. So we don't think that we'll sit with just drilling the holes in a fashion that is not going to give us the greatest chance of defining an area that would become a resource. So we'd be pushing hard. So the news flow is going to be pretty strong between now and then, and we think that the drill bit will actually dictate how successful we'll be. And I think that our next 6 months is going to be, and more particularly, we're going to start drilling in about a month's time. So I can see that there's going to be some real value catalysts coming up pretty quickly, and hopefully with discovery that will continue. Like I said, you get a discovery hole and this will take off. It just will. We're at $10 million market cap. We've got circa 3 in the bank. It doesn't give us a big EV. 7. So we think that there's the value there when we start to find something of, like we keep saying, if it's scale and grade, that's the catalyst.
So while you mentioned discovery hole, pie in the sky thought, do you think you're going to get that 150 meters at 2%, 1% nickel, or are you more likely to get that 10 meters at 3%?
Look, it's hard to gauge. I just think you look at the scale of Kabanga, and there's every likelihood that if you find a replicated structure, you could actually have some very meaningful intercepts. It would be fantastic. I would be very, very excited if we did hit something of that sort of order of magnitude, 100 metre and light. But I think with the style of these bodies and like, you're probably talking anywhere between 5 to 50 metres at high grade, and when I mean high grade, anything above 2% to me is high grade. So anything of those sorts of styles, even if you hit some of these stringers which are high grade but not as big, you can put the probes down, you can find out where it is relative to where it sits in the structure. So I think if we hit anything, Noel, to be honest with you, it will be a good indicator as to what might lay in and around where we are. So I'd like to think that we could replicate something like what maybe Sandfire hit years ago, but or basically what we've got with Julimar and we've got with Chalice. But I want to keep it in context. Anything we hit which is a massive sulphide will basically ring the alarm bells and say, we're onto this. And I think that will give us that impetus, and I'll give all the shareholders that level of excitement, that all those hard work and that potentially patience that people have had to adopt is starting to pay off.
Yeah, I think if you're a betting man, you'll hit something. I don't think it's an if. You'd be, as you said, how do you economize that into something that is you can monetize, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah. Maybe, give you this moment to sell your soul and tell us why Adavale?
Look, I think it's
the whole hog, mate.
The pitch, the whole hog. Look, I'm a reasonably conservative guy. I think I'm reasonably measured in where I'm at in this whole cycle. I've been around long enough to realise that it is exploration, but I'm excited about this. The pitch will be, I'm following my time, and I'm following this whole dedication by way of investment, my own monies. I've got that level of support with the board. We're taking up all our rights. We're putting monies into the placement subject to shareholder approval. We've got fabulous ground holding. We really do. I mean, we're talking 1,200 square kilometres in an area that we've already identified 32, which could get a lot more opportunities. We've got some areas that we haven't actually looked at properly because we haven't had the time to actually devote those sort of energies into it yet. We're in the right place at the right time with the right team, hand assembled in country. All of those sorts of things means that at a market cap of $10 million, we are really cheap. because we've got the monies behind us. We're not cum funds. We're looking at EV that can increase dramatically with any of these discoveries that we're looking to chase. You know, we've got all of those ingredients pulled together. We think we're in an ideal position to really sort of to have a real breakout year. I said it at the beginning of the year. I'll probably say it at the end of the year. That was a good year because we've actually made some real meaningful advances with our exploration, our discovery, our techniques, lining things up. You know, getting things to the point where we've got to give ourselves the best chance of a discovery. And I think you said it. And I'm not selling I don't think I'm selling my soul here. We know some of these areas are mineralised, right? We've already seen that with the Lahuma holes and where we've seen with Kabanga. So we just need to find them. So I don't think there's any doubt that there will be discovery at a point in time. We just want to make sure that it's sooner rather than later, as does everyone else. So I think, like I said, these next couple of months are going to be really important.
All right, mate. Fantastic story. I think we covered a heap. Much better understanding. I think that the whole East African belt needs to be emphasized because, you know, it's an East African nickel belt which really hasn't had much attention, and I love the word belt because I think that really emphasized the fact that you are in a mineralized system that you know how endowed it is. You already know sort of Kabanga's pretty endowed, but the rest of the belt needs work which hasn't really much done. So look, to end, we work with Florence Drummond, who's with the Indigenous Women in Mining Resource Australia, and she's come up with coffee packets for us, and this with the Jala Jala people who make the coffee, and we offer it to people who are silly enough to come on the Samso platform.
Smart enough to come on. Thank you very much, and please pass on my thanks to that lovely lady for actually creating this. And I'm a coffee head, as you know, as the coffees that you just ordered me. So I look forward to maybe sharing some of these with my colleagues as well.
Maybe.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Thanks, Noel.
Till next time.